Okay, good evening, everybody. Thanks for your patience while we sorted out our technical difficulties. It's my pleasure to introduce Candice Wei as tonight's cultural event speaker, who's being brought in by the Department of Interior Design. She's going to tell you a little bit about Candice and her background, and she's going to talk a little bit tonight about her journey to becoming an interior designer. When we were thinking about speakers to bring in, I thought it would be a very interesting idea to bring in somebody who is close to the students who are currently in the program. So you can begin to kind of see the journey as a student going into the profession and then striking out on your own, starting your own firm. So Candice is going to talk a little bit about that journey. So Candice is originally from Vancouver, but lives in Ottawa now. She's a graduate of the BID program at Algonquin College in Ottawa. After completing her degree in interior design, she advanced her career in Africa and the Middle East, where she broadened her perspective in the context of international design. And she started her own, co-founded her own design firm, Wei Sanchez Design Studio, Inc., with her business partner, Mark Sanchez, in 2017. The design firm provides full-scope interior design services for clients in both the public and the private sectors. And Candice, as part of the team, is the creative driving force behind the firm. So her visual arts background and international experience in the design field enriches her role as co-founder and director. Outside of the studio, Candice actively contributes to the local art community through her involvement in artist promotion and commission works throughout the city. So it's my great pleasure to bring Candice Wei to the University of Manitoba, so please join me in welcoming Candice.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? So I'm glad that I've met a bunch of you already today, so I'm not as nervous to talk to you, so we can just have a good chat. And I just want to be real with you about our process on how we got to where we are today. And hopefully you can take a little bit of information away from this that might help you in your design journey. So today, we will be going through a little bit of background information on our company. Kurt kind of summed up what I was going to say, so I'll go through that quickly. And I'll talk about the journey of me and my business partner, Mark Sanchez, and how we found interior design, our steps to get to the program, and then what happened afterwards. I'll then go through a little bit of the process that we use when we are doing our design projects. And then I've got a number of projects that I'll share with you to highlight some of our experiences in it that I think might help you as growing designers. And then at the end, I'll talk about the mistakes we've made and things that we've learned from them. And I was gonna say words of wisdom, but I don't feel like I'm old enough to say that I'm wise enough to share words of wisdom. So it's just lessons learned from little hiccups that we've had and little oopsies that we've learned from. So a bit of background information. Who are we? This is us. That's us looking at our best, and we never look like that, although I'm wearing pretty much the same outfit. Myself and Mark Sanchez, we are the two co-founders of Wei Sanchez Design Studios. So we're located in Ottawa, Ontario. Like Kurt said, we service both private and public sector, and we do mostly commercial design, hospitality, retail, and a little bit of residential. We met in school. So Kurt was our professor, and he was the head of our program at that time when we were studying at Algonquin, doing our bachelor's degree program in interior design. So Mark and I were never friends in school. We actually there was a bit of friendly competition between the two of us. Mark says that he secretly hated me and that he was scared of me. And I don't know how you could be scared of a tiny little girl like me. So that was his impression of me, and I always admired Mark. Mark looked like he stepped out of a GQ magazine every day into class, and I would be lucky if my socks even matched, and like once a week. So he was just so put together, and I really appreciated his design process, and he was just so orderly and always produced great work. My process, on the other hand, is very chaotic and kind of more frazzled, and we just totally contradicted each other from the outside. I wanted to call upon Kurt to just ask if you can sum up us in 1 or 2 words each and just share with them what your impressions of us in school was.
Well, if I remember correctly, Mark would always be the type of person who would kind of say, okay, what do I have to do?
whereas Candice was more like, okay, what else can I be doing? So two dramatically different ways of approaching design projects.
Right, so we were very different, and we never thought we would end up as friends or even as business owners together. So after school, we parted our ways, but before we graduated, oh, I missed a slide. Okay, so what led us into interior design? Interior design wasn't something that Mark and I knew off the bat that we wanted to do. Who in this room knows that interior design is ultimately what you want to do and you've known for a long time? Can I get a raise of hands? Higher. Okay, and who is just dabbling in it because it's of some interest to you, you're curious, but you don't really know where it's going to take you? Okay. Who has a dream of starting their own firm one day? Awesome. Okay. So what led us into interior design? Mark actually had a degree in graphic design first, so he did 4 years of that program, and as he finished it, he realized that it really wasn't for him. It wasn't the right fit. It didn't really inspire him, so he took some time off and worked retail. So he did a lot of merchandising in this job, and that's when he developed a sense of space planning and interesting ways to create customer experiences. And then his boss at that time had taken the interior design program, and that's what sparked his interest. So he had this curiosity to look into it and then follow through with that curiosity by starting the program. He told me recently that it was the first day of school where we had a hand drafting class, and it just all clicked for him. He was so excited and he fell in love right away. So on the first day of school, he knew this is my calling. Then for me, I went through a multitude of different things before I got into interior design. I did a lot of school and I didn't get very far, and I thought that maybe I was a quitter or I was just not good at school, but I went through 3 different programs. I did pre-commerce, I did art history, I did graphic design for marketing, and every time something wasn't right and I wasn't in love with what I was doing. So it was really difficult for my family. I come from a very traditional Chinese family, and they were just, pissed, but I had to follow my heart, and I couldn't do it. So I took some time off after that experience, and I worked at an architecture firm just because it was a job that popped up and they needed an office assistant. So I took on that job to learn a little bit about the industry, and that's when I realized that the dynamic of designers and architects and engineers together coming up with this process of creating something out of nothing was really inspiring to me, but still I didn't really know that's what I wanted to do. So I fell into the design program, and it was also in the first couple of weeks of school that I realized all these random skills that I'd built in my life from all the different things that I had done, they never made sense before, and then all of a sudden they applied. So I felt a sense of belonging now, and I was really excited to see that I had a chance of finishing school, which I did. I graduated. So working abroad in our 3rd year of school, and I think some of you were talking about placements that maybe you have to do a co-op. So we did have to do a co-op in our 3rd year. And out of all the students, there were 3 of us that really wanted to get out of Ottawa. So we were looking for any co-ops around the world that might take us. And Mark found one in London, UK. So he was able to immerse himself in European culture here and learn about different ways of designing things. And he worked with a group of very detailed-oriented designers where he was able to kind of develop that sense of detailed design. And in Europe, the space requirements are so different from in North America. And he really developed this acute sense of spatial awareness when he was there. And then for me, I really wanted to get out of the snow, so I was thinking of anywhere else but Ottawa to go. And I was getting kind of worried because out of everybody, I was the last one to find a placement, and I didn't think I was going to land one until the very last minute. I found one in Morocco. So I ended up in North Africa. I had no idea where Morocco was on the map. And this was before, all the cool girls on Instagram were posing in front of these beautiful fountains in Morocco. So I went there without knowing anybody, without knowing anything about the culture, and I was willing to do something different and take this risk. So I went out there. I think I got the job a week before I had to move there. So it was a big, big change. And out there, not only did I experience this different type of design and a different world of design, but also I was interacting with so many different types of people. I was working for a Canadian firm that had stationed a group of designers out there alongside many other disciplines from around the world that were working on this project. It lasted about 3 years, and the team was there for the whole time. So communication was something I learned was very important there, because there were days that I was on site and I would be working with a Moroccan carpenter and an Italian carpenter, and they would be yelling at each other and not knowing what each other were saying, and I was yelling at them, and I realized that there's different ways of communicating depending on who you're talking to. So that experience really helped me in building the firm as well. So following that, Mark and I finished school, and he ended up working at a commercial firm in Ottawa, very well-established commercial firm, and I went back to Morocco to finish that project with the team. And then following that experience, there was an opening in the Middle East, so I went with that company to Doha, Qatar, where I was supposed to work on a 1-year contract there. Now, my experience there was so different compared to Morocco. I was in love with the culture, I was in love with the setting, it was so beautiful, and I loved my team. And then in Doha, I felt immediately that I had a disconnect with the environment. I realized that my environment really affects me, and it's a desert with no trees, basically, and I need trees, I need mountains. I'm from BC, so it really affected my my sense of well-being out there, and after 4 months, I couldn't do it anymore. So I remember giving my notice, and it was one of the scariest things I've ever done, because you're with a firm that took a chance on you to take you somewhere else and get you settled in a different place in the world, and it just didn't work. So that's a lesson to you that if something doesn't feel right, even though it's super hard, just follow through with your gut, because it's going to help lead to different things and better things. And it really did for us. So when I came back to Canada, I had no job, I had no place to stay. I just knew that everything was up in the air and nothing was for sure, except for the fact that I knew that I wasn't on the right track before. So I called up Mark and I said, "Can you get me a job at your firm?" So he put out my portfolio, and I was able to get a job there, so we ended up working together. But again, we were in this situation where we're at this firm together, and we're sitting back to back in an open studio, and we never got a chance to work together. So in school, we never worked on a project together, and then working at the same firm, again, we never worked together. But I always still admired his work, and vice versa. It wasn't until we started taking lunches and breaks together and kind of talking about the bigger things we wanted to do in life, and that led us to follow our dreams. So I remember meeting and saying, "Well, I wish we could do this," or "I wish we could do things differently." And we had very similar goals, and that's when we realized that the only way to achieve them was to do it together. So after all these big picture ideas, after a couple of months, we figured, why can't we do this? We're in a place where we have nothing to risk. We didn't have kids. We didn't have much that we couldn't bounce back from. So we thought, we'll devise a plan. So we figured if we were to start a firm, we probably won't get work right away. And if we don't save up enough money to live, we're going to starve. So we need to save up enough for 6 months and then find a client. And then the second we find our client, we're going to quit, which is super scary, because quitting is not a fun thing to do. I remember the day where we landed our client. I got a call, and I was in the studio. I sent Mark a text, and I said, "Hey, we've landed our first client. I'm quitting." This is me quitting, but that's Mark saying, "Not before I do." So he quit before me. He budged in front of me and sent his notice in before me, and he said, "Sayonara." So that was the story of how it all began. Now, in the process of transitioning between working at a firm and working for ourselves, it was important for us to remain very professional in the whole process of things. So we gave ample time and notice. We found designers to replace us at the firm, and Mark actually stayed behind for 3 months to finish up his projects. So we wanted to make sure that, especially in a small design industry in Ottawa, that we were doing things the proper way and not burning any bridges. Now, another aspect of professionalism was we wanted to ensure that when we started off as a firm that we were credible. So that meant taking our examinations and getting our accreditations. So I took my NCIDQ, very, very difficult, but passed and got my certification. And Mark got his BCINs. So I don't know in Manitoba if you guys have a similar sort of examination, but in Ontario, and it might just be unique to Ontario, you don't necessarily need an architect to stamp a set of drawings to submit for permit as long as you have your BCIN. And this applies to buildings under 4 stories and under 6,000 square feet in size. So as a firm, we wanted to be able to stamp our own drawings and take ownership of our designs from beginning to end. So Mark took his exams and he passed, and then we were legit. So yeah, that's how it all began. So I'm going to talk about our process. So you might be familiar or might not be familiar with different design phases that you go through in a project, taking it from your idea to construction. And it might be different for different firms, but this is what we follow to really give our project, to build the strength of the project from a very strong basis. So the first phase is pre-design. So pre-design is when you meet with the client, you have that interface and you get to know what they need. You develop their space requirements, you try to get any existing plans, and you go to site and you measure and make sure everything is accurate. The worst situation is when you get a set of plans and you design according to that, you go to site and you're like, oh, the columns are all 6 feet off and it's like way smaller than it is. So pre-design is a very important phase to form the foundation of the rest of the process. Once you've got all that in line, schematic design comes. So I saw a lot of you guys, basically we're doing a lot of schematic design review today, so figuring out your bubble diagrams, adjacencies, how your requirements are going to fit into the space. This is when you are going back and forth with your team and with your client and with the information that you're provided in the beginning, and making sure that you're coming up with a space design that's feasible and that all the requirements are going to fit in the space. So once the client is happy with the design, you go into design development. This is when you take that 2D drawing and you make it come to life. So you get to come up with your concept design, you get to come up with ways to express how you want to have the clients experience the space. And you can do this through materiality, through your finishes, through lighting, through all different ways. And this is also when we start talking to your consultants. So on most projects you need a mechanical and electrical engineer because they do things that we don't have the knowledge to do. So planning out your lighting, your switching, your HVAC, these are all things that you don't necessarily see but are super important to coming up with a very solid design. So having a good relationship with those sub-consultants and forming a good relationship and working as a team at this point helps you collaborate and come up with something that works for everybody, and then in turn you end up with a very strong construction project. And then it's drawing production. So this is when you take all the stuff from before and then put it into a technical drawing package that then gets submitted for permit. It then goes out for tender and then ultimately gets constructed. If you're not familiar with the word tender, it's basically the phase that things get priced out. So tender administration is an interior designer's role in this process. So when you've got a bunch of contractors bidding on a project, there's often questions. And this is when you answer those questions and make sure that there's any discrepancies that are cleared out or any things that need to be clarified, they're clarified at that time. And the phase that's most fun for me is construction, because you get to see your design come to life. You get to see things built in the real form. But with this phase comes a lot of unknowns, and when you start opening up walls and ceilings and floors, you start discovering things that might inhibit your design from before. So I remember designing a coffee shop bar with 2 washrooms, and that requires coring through your concrete to get your plumbing locations. We had scanned the entire floor and found out that there was conduits and rebar and all these things running everywhere. So the contractor said you can core here, and that's it. So after going through all that planning and design and through permit, we had to completely change the layout and make it work to what the limitations were. So in this phase, you have to be very adaptable, open to change, and you have to remember that your design is still supposed to be a solution to the problem, so not losing sight of that. So projects, we're going to see some pictures. The Canadian National Institute for the Blind, CNIB, I think there's a location here, I saw it on my drive in. They were one of our wonderful clients, and this project was one of our first commercial projects. And it was really interesting because we're designing for a group of users that can't necessarily visualize the space or experience it through sight. So design was so important in a different way here, and communication was very important in this project because we're trying to convey a design to a client that can't see our presentation. So being adaptable and exercising different ways of communication was key in this project. Lighting and design was huge. So the way that someone who doesn't have the same abilities of sight as us, the way that they function and move throughout a space, for it to feel comfortable and safe, you have to think about many other aspects that might not be as important in other projects. So lighting, the glare that things reflect off of into somebody's eyes, the circulation in the space has to be much more clear than any other space. Other things like colors, so from every single different plane, there needs to be a 70% change in contrast. So that's something that we had to build into the design. And what was important for me and Mark was that we wanted the space to feel modern and work with their new branding, their rebranding. And we didn't want it to feel institutional. So we wanted the space to kind of feel homey, and they had said they wanted the entrance to feel like an Apple store. So it was something that it was important to us to tackle that challenge and come up with a space that was very inclusive, but not obvious that we were trying to answer to different needs of different people. We included a Braille wall, and this was a little feature that we thought would be interesting, where only someone who couldn't see and understood Braille could interact with that design and have them have a sense of ownership of their space and feel super included in the space that was supposed to be their community hub. So from that project, we were able to build really great client relationships with CNIB, and they told us that they had this project. They had just acquired 33 acres of farmland and wanted to put this guide dog training campus on it. And Mark and I were like, wow, that's super cool, but we don't know how to design for dogs, and we don't know how to design on farmland. But we said yes. And in that moment, we thought, okay, it's important to be transparent with your client. If you don't know everything, which you're never gonna know everything, sometimes it's not good to pretend. So we told them right away that we were super excited to work on this, but we had no idea how to do any of it. And neither did they. They had ideas of what they wanted this training campus to be like, what dog kennels should look like, but we had no idea how to construct it. So we recommended that we were going to do a research document so that we could be better equipped with information and that they could be exposed to some of the best practices out in the world of dog kennel design. So standards and sizes, some planning considerations. We realized that a dog is more happy when there's different levels in their space so that they can hide under it, they can go on top of it, they can have different options within this small enclosure. So, interior design for dogs. From all that information, we came up with kennel design typicals. So this is taking all this information and condensing it into spaces and what's required for them. After doing this, After doing this, some other considerations were there was going to be an office next to dog kennels, and we had to figure out how to keep the space clean, how to keep the sanitary spaces far away from spaces that were with dog waste and other items like that, how to handle dog waste. These are things that as an interior designer, you never think you're going to have to deal with dog poo. And that was one of the biggest things on this project, is how are we going to get rid of this stuff and where does it go? So you're really faced with a lot of unknowns, and once you're able to access your tools to figure out the information, then you know, and now you can design another dog kennel. With all that information, you put it into a schematic design, and you can come up with a couple of ideas that then gets presented to the client, which ultimately informs your final design solution. So this is a little 3D rendering that we did of the interior space, and we wanted it to still speak to the design we did before at the hub space for the blind community. Integrating items that made it feel more homey and less of a industrial space was important. And this is a project photo that actually Mark just sent me today that I included. So it's halfway done, and that's a photo of it. Happy Goat Coffee. So Happy Goat Coffee is a local roaster in Ottawa. And at the time of this project, Happy Goat had never used designers. So they had 2 locations, and they were one of them was in an industrial garage, and it had this really homey, thrown together feeling and was organically put together. So their brand was this laid back, artsy atmosphere that was anti-designed. When they started expanding, they required help of designers to get them through permit and develop the designs, and that's where we came on board. So for us, this project was interesting because there was a very, very small budget, and we wanted to say so much. This was our first commercial project, and we're like, this is our how we're going to have the world access our designs. It's so public facing. We want to say so much, but there's no budget. So I remember Mark and I wanting to buy throw pillows for this space, and we couldn't even afford that in the budget. So we asked the client for the bags that their beans came in from around the world, and we were on our knees, hand stitching these things, stuffing them, and getting them into the project. We wanted a cool ceiling feature, didn't have any budget for that, so we were resourceful. We found a ladder and ran these spider lights through it, and that was the feature. So it had this thrown together kind of appeal, and still stuck with that organically put together space that they had already created in their branding. Now, we never knew where this project was going to take us, but it really propelled us in the world of coffee shop design. So we have now done 6 locations with them in the last 2 years. And this was their second project with us. So this project had almost no budget, and they were ready to open it up just as is because it was already a restaurant before. But when you have a client, you have to always advocate for them. You have to push your ideas if you think it's going to be something that's going to help them. So we really pushed to change the space and make as little updates as possible. So this was the space before, and we couldn't allow that ceiling tile to be in a space that we designed. So we're like, no. So throughout the process, we were able to then build more trust with the client, and today this is the one we just completed, and we're able to really push our designs further with the trust of our clients. You're able to be more creative and believe in your product more when someone else really believes in you. So the whole thing, we had this creative freedom to do whatever we want and or whatever we wanted, and ultimately we came up with something that both our client and we were very happy with. So this project, Third Line Health and Fitness, this was another project that we had no idea what we were doing in the beginning. So it was our first new build project. We did the plans for this, the construction plans, with no architect, and like I said, under a certain size, we were able to stamp our own drawings. So we did this project from beginning to end and managed the process from conceptual design all the way through construction and completion. This project was an anomaly to us and to the city of Ottawa. They had never seen a commercial building built on a piece of agricultural land that was also residential. So the two clients lived a little bit further upwards on this piece of farmland and wanted to build a building where they were going to house their home-based business. The husband was a personal trainer, the wife was a physiotherapist, and they had this great idea to start this really interesting idea, but didn't know how to build it. And so that's where Mark and I came into play, and this was a project that is an example of accessing your tools. So it's okay if you don't know everything, you just need to know how to get to it. So we went to the city so much, they were super annoyed of us, but we just went back and asked questions and asked questions. And when one office would get annoyed at us, we'd drive to the next one and ask them there. So it was a lot of pushing and fighting, and the city wasn't going to pass it. So it took us 3 months of fighting with the city because they weren't going to allow this project to be on that type of land. But we were so sure of our interpretation of the code, of zoning, of all the things that we had researched in the beginning to get here, and we weren't about to let it go. So we really had to manage our clients' expectations, and this is something that you have to do in every project, is manage your clients' expectations. Don't overpromise. It's better to underpromise and then overdeliver, because you never want to tell them something can be done and then let them know that actually it can't. So we got it passed and we started building. And one of the most important things in this project was the client really wanted access to views. They were on this beautiful piece of land, and they wanted access to outside from the inside. In this image, you can see we wanted to connect the inside to the outside with the garage door so that they could do fitness training, circuit training that went all the way in and out. And then this one, when you're running on a treadmill or doing your squats or whatever you do in circuit training, they wanted you to be able to look outside and not feel so I don't know, so that you're doing such a treacherous workout. And this is it built, so we were really able to capture these beautiful views from outside just by how we framed them from inside. So the experience of the user and how the gym, what was important to them, it was something that we really wanted to capture in designing the space, and that was the end result. Hair Republic was our first hair salon, and this client was also going through rebranding. They wanted to create this VIP experience for a client that they wouldn't be able to get anywhere else in Ottawa. So one idea that the client had was to put all these TV screens around the hair washing station so they would have this visual, dynamic display to look at all the time. But I remember thinking, when I get my hair washed, I don't want to be looking at TV screens. I'd like to look at something much more beautiful. And usually when you're laying back and you're looking up, it's either a drywall ceiling or pot lights that are shining hot spots in your eyes, and it's just not comfortable. So we proposed an upside down live floating garden, which in SketchUp is totally easy to draw, but in reality, you need to know how to be able to construct this thing and detail it out so that it can get built. And here's another area where you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. You want to know that you can do this before you even suggest it. So we were able to have it done. This picture was taken before the construction was completed, so there's no shelves. But this was a trial run of having the upside down floating flowers, and it really created this interesting experience for the customer that nowhere else in Ottawa had. Cafe Doco was a client that was so design, they had such a design mind, and you'll come by clients that will let you do anything because they're just interested in what kind of creativity that you have to offer. When you get clients like this, you really want to take advantage of it because there are going to be projects that you do that aren't that interesting. There's going to be projects that you're just designing a corridor and putting a couple lights in. You know, there's going to be projects that you're not as inspired to do. So when you get those moments, to do something cool, then do something cool. So in this project, we really wanted to integrate some funky street art, and we were able to have that done, and it really brought some interest to the space and helped it stand out from other donut shop spaces. Another interesting thing about this project was it was on the Quebec side, so it was in a city that bordered us, and we didn't have access to site as much as we usually would. So we were able to communicate through our drawings and through 2 site visits to the contractor to build something from nothing to this with just communication through drawings. And your design is only as good as how your contractor builds it, and having a good relationship with them, being able to talk to them over the phone and not being afraid to ask them questions and collaborate on how things get built, that is what's going to end up, how you're going to end up with a strong project. Urbandale Construction is one of the oldest development companies in Ottawa, and they had their head office that they wanted to update, and they wanted to refresh. And in the beginning, they wanted to keep this pink granite and some other things, and I wasn't going to have it. So we were advocating for the client. We were saying that if you want to update your space, we have to think about it as a whole, not just little pieces here and there. And if you can push your design and get your client to believe in you and believe in your ability to create something great, then they're going to let you do it. So we ended up changing out finishes, and really we didn't do much adjustment to the built environment, but it was cleaning it up and giving the space more of a sense of timelessness and just tailoring it to the current day. And this is the last project that I'm going to share with you. So the Carlton Suite Hotel is one of our most recent projects, and this is an example of when you totally miss the boat on a design concept. So there will be times where you meet with a client and you think you know what you want, but then you realize that you totally don't know. So we presented this to our client, and you could just tell by his eyes that he's like, what is this? And instead of crying, which we would have done in school, you take it as constructive criticism. You work with them at that moment and use that as an experience to figure out what they don't want in person, and then collaborate and really hone down on what they're actually looking for. So whenever that happens, it's a great opportunity to even strengthen your design more. So he wanted it to be more playful. We made it more playful, but too playful. So we presented this, and he was like, it's not what I wanted. And then we went back to the drawing board and started refining more. And design is always about refining, on getting to that solution that works the absolute best. So this is what we ended up with. It kind of still had the same elements as before, but we really cleaned things up, and were able to produce something that the client was happy with and we were excited about. So this is in construction now, and we're very excited for it to be built. It will be our first hotel. So I'm going to close with lessons learned, and we're going to have a Q&A session after this, so this isn't the last bit. First thing is, don't take things personally. Like I said, if a client isn't happy with something, it's not because you're a bad designer. It's maybe because you had some miscommunication or something else happened, but don't take it personally. Don't be upset that it's something to do with you. Just take it constructively. You know, in other aspects, like we're all doing design, we're doing architecture, it's an industry where some people don't necessarily think design is a real job. Sometimes people think I'm just picking colors and doing beautiful window treatments, and that's what I do as my daily job, and it's really not. And when people underestimate you or when Mark and I started our design firm, there was a lot of talk behind our backs and from people we didn't even know that we would take so personally, but there's no point in listening to those people because they don't know what you've been through, they don't know the process, they don't know what it's like to be in the design program, how strenuous it is, how much you have to go through. So just keep on doing it and yeah, don't pay it any attention because it's not worth it. Build trust and great relationships. This is how Mark and I have gotten everything that we've done today is through building trust and great relationships with clients, with our contractors, with all the people that are around you. You know, some people will work with engineers, but they won't work in tandem with them. They'll almost make it seem like they're the highest person on this project and you need to answer to them, and there's this hierarchy. But the way we work is that everything is a collaborative effort and everybody's the same and everyone has their own specialties and their discipline, and you have to, we have so much respect for that because they have all this information that you don't know that's going to help you make your project stronger. So building those relationships and trust between people is how you're going to build upon your career as a designer. We are over 100 projects deep since we first started, and every single one has been through referrals. So it must have been a year before we came up with like our company business cards or our website and our Instagram, and those things are just the tip of the iceberg because they aren't the things that get us our work right now. It's word of referral and doing a good job before and having people share those experiences and people trust their friends and what their experiences were. Things don't happen overnight. Some people think that Mark and I quit our jobs one day and then all of a sudden we started a firm and then it was super easy. It's not easy. And so for the people that said that they have dreams of starting their own firm, it is hard work, and you might go into it because you think you're going to get more freedom, but the type of freedom you get is very different from what you might think freedom is. Freedom in time, you don't get more time, you get no time. But when it's worth it and when you love it, it makes it all that, it makes it worth it. And when Mark and I were first starting out, we tried to keep overhead low. So him and I would work from each other's kitchen counters for over a year, sitting on backless stools for like 10, 11, 12 hours a day, working day, night, 7 days a week. We lived on streets where there was only 2-hour parking, so every 2 hours we're running out, moving our car, running out, moving our car, and that's not a way to run a business. So those are the things that we had to do and get over to get to where we are today. Always do your best. So when you're doing a project, treat it the same as any other project. You might get a project where something is so small and minute and you might not think it's going to get you anywhere, and you'll just do it quick. But if you treat every project the same and approach it the same and give it your all and use that as an expression of who you are as a designer, it's like a symbol of who you are, then it might lead to somewhere. The smallest projects that we ever did amounted to some of our biggest and best clients now. And if we had messed up on those projects or not really put our all into our client relationships and doing a good job through our process, then we most likely wouldn't have gotten those clients now. Take risks and have confidence. So starting a business was the biggest risk that Mark and I ever took, but we didn't have much to risk. You know, we had the chance of, if everything failed, we could still probably go back and work at a firm or find something else. So know what your risks are, and when you're taking them, you know, be confident that they're going to be worth it. And have confidence. Trust in your ability as a designer. When you go into the design world, you're going to have so much knowledge. Like, you guys are in, what year are you in? Your second year? Third year? And the experience that I had listening to you guys talking today and all these cool concepts that you're coming up with, like, there are a lot of star designers amongst you guys, and it's just very, very exciting to see. And, you know, your work, put everything into it and don't be afraid to show it, and don't be afraid to, you know, have the confidence to do something big and different. Follow your heart and stay excited. This is extremely cliche, and Mark even said don't like put this in here, but I think it's super important to follow your heart, because along the way, all these little things that, you know, we decided not to follow through on because our heart wasn't in it, all these little things that we were curious about and went after, these things all, in retrospect, when you look back, they all connected and got us to opening up our own business and, you know, doing something that we really truly enjoy. And stay excited. Stay excited about what you're doing, and if you take a look at what you're doing now and you're not fully interested in it, or you're not excited about talking about it, then there's a chance that it might not be the right thing for you. And when you do reevaluate, when something's difficult and you have this moment where you're like, oh, I want to quit and it's not worth it, take yourself out of that moment and zoom out and think about the end goal and think, is that end goal still something that I want? I remember when I was working for my last firm, I had a moment where I thought, I don't even think I want to be a designer anymore. Like, I don't like this. And I realized it was the environment that I was putting myself in, and I was just in a negative mind state. But when I zoomed out and looked at the bigger picture, I remembered I still love design. Like, it's inside of me, so I just needed to change my situation. And that's it. So that was our design journey in a nutshell, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and feel free to ask me any questions.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Candice about the presentation?
I'm just wondering if you can explain a little bit of what it was like from the transition from school into working experience.
School into working experience. So the co-op really helped. Do you guys have a co-op program where you go off and do a placement? So that, it really gives you a taste of what it is like to work in a studio. A lot of people in your situation probably haven't even worked at an office or a studio situation, so having that chance to be immersed in that is so important. And when you're picking your placements or when you're in them, take full advantage of it. Like, take it as a tool to really understand and ask questions, and you know, you're surrounded by so many people that are willing to help. So just, I think that is such a great aspect to be included in a program, and it'll help you in your transition to finding what you really want to do. And another thing is, don't be afraid to try different things. Like, Mark and I figured out what we wanted to do by canceling out a lot of things we didn't want to do. So be curious enough to go after things, and then if you realize that that's not the right thing, then don't be afraid to switch it, and until you figure out what is exciting to you.
Anyone else? Going once, twice. Okay, can everybody join me in thanking Candice for the presentation for today?